The government failed to guarantee a burden sharing arrangement for non-guaranteed bank debt as part of the bailout arrangements. Ireland's commitments on sovereign debt must be honoured in full. Ireland's commitments on debt under guarantee must be honoured in full. What legal or moral compulsion is on Ireland, however, to honour in full debt incurred by Irish banks when there was no state involvement in the arrangements. These loans were entered into freely by willing lenders and willing borrowers with absolutely no state participation. The interest rate charged represented the risk at the time, and there never was a state liability. It is obscene that liability for these loans is now being transferred to the Irish taxpayer and in many respects to the poorest of the Irish taxpayers. There is 10 billion of subordinated debt in the Irish banks. There is 15 billion of non-guaranteed senior debt. The Irish government and the Irish taxpayer has no liability whatsoever for these debts, but the bailout deal is now forcing them to accept liability because the bailout deal puts this imposition on them. So the Minister, in his budget, reduces social welfare payments. He punishes the blind, the disabled, the widows, the carers, the unemployed. He taxes the poorest at work. And for what? So that the taxpayers can take on the liability for debts that the country never incurred and that arose from private arrangements between private institutions. What a disaster, what an obscenity. How can the government stand over it? How can our European colleagues stand over it? When the deal was agreed, there was an attempt to justify it because any renegotiation of bank debt in Ireland could have a major adverse effects on those banks in Germany, France and the UK that had lent to the Irish banks. This consideration may have been valid some time ago, but it is no longer valid. The latest available bank data has shown that Irish guaranteed bank debt has been sold on at a discount to hedge funds in the USA and the UK and Luxembourg, as well as to smaller speculative investors. If you're interested in the data, Minister, you'll find it through Clearstream and Euroclear. And you can track the sales of bonds at discounts right across. And they're no longer being held by the European banks that lent in the first instance. They're in the possession of hedge funds now, and you can find their names on those two sites. If 25%, if for example a hedge fund buys Irish unguaranteed bank debt at 80 cents in the euro, it stands to make 25% on its investment if Ireland continues to redeem the debt at par. The position has now become indefensible that the Irish taxpayer, even the poorest taxpayers, should be required to underpin the speculation of hedge fund investors. There must be burden sharing of bank debt, transparent, open, negotiated burden sharing. It must deal with both subordinate debt and non-guaranteed senior debt. And if you want to find the origin of the phrase burden sharing, it was Jean-Paul Trichet himself that used it in the first instance as chairman of the Paris Club, which was the first international institution involved in the discounting of debt. All right. If the EU finds this approach unacceptable for fear of a knock-on effect in Europe, and if the Irish taxpayer is expected to underpin the banking system in other member states, then where is the quid pro quo? Where was the quid pro quo in the negotiation? The Icelandic government has negotiated 15-year money at 3.2% from the UK and Dutch governments for their bank bailout. Ireland is being charged 5.8%, and at least one tranche of EU funding has a built-in profit margin of 2.9%. This is not solidarity. This is not in accordance with the spirit of Article 122 of the treaty. The government's negotiation has led to a very bad result and a very bad deal. The deal needs to be renegotiated, Minister, and Fine Gael in the election will look for a mandate to do so.
Thank you very much, Deputy Noonan.